Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MEF webinar. If you're joining us live, it is Thursday, July 25th, and it's 4 o'clock in UK. But over there, we have Marco Lafrentz, and then Dr. Marco is in Germany. So 5 o'clock over there, Marco. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Marco is a vice
Thanks,
president.
Dario. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Marco. Marco, you are the Vice President of Business and Market Development at NetNumber, a company we know as one of the experts of all those things what we call mobile numbers, and not just mobiles, all the things that happens, how to make it, including how to make things more secure and more valid in this industry where things is changing so fast. But you're not talking about necessarily that today. The topic chosen is very close to our heart and MEF and to many of our members. It's the future of messaging, I should say. The title, In Text We Trust, Rebuilding Security and Generating Revenue via Messaging. Before I even say some word, are we off tempo? The majority of the things that I read around, Marco, are not about how great the future of SMS is. There are lots of clouds out there, fraud being one of them, commercial issues is another one. If you are specifically working in the international side of the SMS, it's not very good news. So you like to be an iconoclast. You like to butt for the other part and say that, no, things are good. Let's then start, in case anybody is new out there, let me ask you the very basic, before we go to what had happened the last few years and yesterday, before the history almost of the latest development in fraud and so on. Why is text messaging so important? Why is it working for enterprises and users?
You're absolutely right. I am an advocate for text messaging, and I will be, and I will hold up the flag for a longer time. And there are dark clouds, I can't deny this, but it is still up to date the case that SMS is the primary channel for time-critical business communications. And with this, it has been successfully established for notification and authentication use cases. And there are many studies out there that show how successful it is and how big the market has become, right? And given all of the bad press, it may come as a surprise that in this year's business messaging survey done by MEF, we can go to the website and take a look. That business messaging survey that was done shows no decline over the past 3 years in the preference for SMS as a top channel to receive business messaging. And I think the reason for the preference of the consumers for this channel are all well known, although it may seem that the people recently start a little bit forgetting about that. Ubiquity, right? It's a big word, but it means reach everybody globally. And it's something that the majority of OTT channels are yet to achieve and to accomplish, which are perceived as a competition, right? Another very important success factor that made it also historically very successful is it's very easy to use by brands, right? All you need is get the consumer's mobile number, pick a sender ID that's reflecting your brand or part of your corporate identity, and write up a meaningful text that will convert. You have no end user requirements. I think that's a big factor. Like you don't need an application or anything. And all of that is presented to you in general for very good value for money. You get the immediate attention of the consumer, knowing that messages are read quickly, at like costs of cents per attention span, right? You have mentioned correctly that sort of shifts in terms of like value for money, and we'll probably talk about this a bit more in a bit, for international A2P, because there are like pricing problems. But on a national level, which is still the majority of consumer like A2P, pricing are still stable and decent, right? So the preference by consumers is what like motivates me the most. Like they find it convenient, right? And they find it so convenient. There is another study that MEF has put out. We try to remember it. It was about the fact, like, what do you do about the trust in like your accounts and in security? What efforts do you put in? And I think there was 15 to 70% of the consumers use the password manager, which I consider to be a very basic, very simple thing to do, to choose like very difficult passwords, you put them in a password manager, and then you secure your accounts. But no, only 15 to 17% of people do that, and the majority of reasons are lack of knowledge, and it's not convenient, it's complicated to use, they don't know what to do. So almost every second consumer opts to secure their accounts rather than through a complicated password and password manager processes through 2FA via SMS. It's their choice, right? It's their preference. So I cannot repeat myself by saying it's still the primary channel for time-critical business communications, for notifications and authentication use cases, as it has historically been proven to be successful in.
It's universal and consumers accept it. So what more can you ask for, something that's transparently as that? And I will still be playing the devil's advocate, though, and I will still remember, and thanks, by the way, for remembering some of our study I met from the consumer trust study and the consumer surveys we do every year. So go and download them. But one of our members, Juniper Research, just published last week, I believe, a few days ago, research showing that from 66 billion, the total SMS revenue in 2024, we're going to see a big drop by 2029, according to their numbers, to 47 billion. Now, I would still say that's a big pie, but it is a very, a remarkable drop on the base of it. RCS grows 10 times and WhatsApp becomes, but I would probably say, even if the importance of SMS is not as, relevant as it is now, as it would be now, but definitely it still stays. So we're not looking at SMS disappearing, but some of those analysts are saying that something is happening. So what's the role then of this communication channel in the industry beyond today? What is going to become SMS in the future years? Is it still going to be a relevant channel still happening, or is it going to be relegated to some specific use cases? What do you see in the future for SMS?
Yeah, I like this question a lot, and I keep getting these questions. And I think one of the things that we need to be aware of, yes, there is a lot of decline, and there is also a lot of fraud happening. Right, and we can potentially also talk a little bit more about this, because fighting this is a crucial element to protect the channel. But the use cases that you have in there today, which are around notification, are still growing in usage. Right, like you still don't have a full penetration of all medium businesses, of all large businesses, of all departments for their use cases and the potential how they can use it for notification. And the same goes for authentication, right? It's still a very powerful use case. And these use cases try to be migrated over to other channels, and they have big investments to drive marketing campaigns to move these use cases over to other OTT channels. And some of the regulators even forbid to use SMS as a channel, like Singapore did for not using A2P SMS for banking transactions, right? But if you have this, the alternatives, are they really better? Are they more secure? Probably not. And if so, and if their proposition is more compelling, and specifically with the rich media messaging channels, right? What's their ultimate goal? Today, brands spend a lot of money on the SMS channel, right? As it is a good of return of investment, and it generates a lot of, you have just named the volumes, a lot of revenue for many players, which attracts pirates, of course. Now, the new channels that are still growing, and the percentages are high because their absolute revenues are still low. WhatsApp is a good example. They want to get a piece of that pie, and this is why they make their channel attractive to that. But what happens once use cases have migrated, right? They know that their channel is more valuable because you can do more things. So the prices that you would see today, you can probably anticipate that that's not the price level they will stay at, right? Because they think that they can provide more, you can do more, you can generate new use cases, conversations, better relationships. So the prices will potentially go up to a point where you would say, I don't want all of this. I have very simple authentication and notification use cases. So can I please get back a channel where I can have this without a lot of fuss around it, not complicated implementations and project costs with a high return of investment. So SMS will stay in that segment where it is today.
So you say that some people are really going in and see the value. We'll keep on seeing the value. But you also mentioned fraud right now. So I need to go back to that word. Unfortunately, we go back to this word a lot. Fraud is pervasive in SMS. How is targeted? How is changing? What type of fraud do you think we are seeing now within this market? And you get to see a lot of numbers. You get to see a lot of things out there from that number. So what's the things you have to be looking at and potentially target?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the numbers that you mentioned in terms of overall revenue describe a market with a lot of players, right? And when we talk about business messaging, the primary factor that is probably driving this down is the fact that brands don't want to spend more money on this channel, right? They were happy with what they had spent so far, but they don't want to spend more. They've sort of reached their limits. And this is where one of the attack vectors becomes a problem. Because at the top of the value chain, the fraudsters attack the brands, their service providers, and potentially their aggregators by artificially generating traffic, but also by artificially inflating pricing. Those two sort of like go hand in hand because they have the same target. They have the goal to basically bring the elasticity of the budgets of the brands to its absolute limits. Like you want to squeeze as much out of the brands as you can get. And if you can't do that by good means, you actually apply bad means. And I think that's a problem in the industry, that we squeeze there too much to the budgets of the ones that feed the industry. And these are the two methods, and the other one is certainly also message trashing, right? But these are not the only ones that are being attacked. The carriers, the same, that also suffer, their revenues suffer by means of like gray routing and potentially also message trashing or artificially inflated traffic. And I think the most prominent attack vector right now that has gotten the most attention, brought also the regulators and national authorities to the table, is the fact that consumers are being targeted, right? Like this currently doesn't dramatically decrease the revenue of the SMS industry directly, right? Because the harm is done on the consumer side. Their assets are being targeted. Pirates try to do steal the consumer's money by luring them into buying stuff that they don't need, or by giving away credentials, making transactions that they shouldn't make through brand impersonation, spoofing, smishing, pick butchering, you name it. The worst case is even like steal the entire identity. This does not directly hurt our revenue, but it can definitely have a negative impact on the consumer's preference for the channel if they continuously combine the bad effects on the channel itself. But then at the same time, also the brand, they attack from both sides. On the one side, the brands are being attacked to having to spend more for the same result. But then on the other hand, also attacking the subscribers and the consumers and eroding the trust into that channel, not wanting potentially that channel anymore. Although studies don't show that. Studies don't show that consumers don't want the traffic anymore. That's not what's happening. Yes, they have financial losses and they want that the channel gets protected. They don't want the channel to be replaced, right? That's a different demand. The consumers still want it. They like it. They like the convenience. The usage of OTP SMS from a consumer perspective doesn't go down. The preference as a channel doesn't go down. So they're actually asking to be protected. They're not asking to be replaced. It's a different problem than what the industry sees because their revenues are being attacked on the other side by fraudsters. But I think that's a different conversation, and not that I want to debate today, because a lot of this is within the industry, right? It's not directly affecting the brands or the consumers, and it's certainly also not what the regulators are concerned about or what the national authorities are concerned about.
You just mentioned MEF a couple of times, and thank you, by the way, as a board member of MEF. appreciated, your help to fly the flag. I'll do it again. There is a third framework that has been available for some time, so third editions. You were just talking about some of those things. We identify in the third from framework for SMS in the 4 different areas: consumers impact, business impact, MNOs impact, and messaging services. You heard from you how important the consumer side is for regulators. Is something changing though? Have we managed to address, given that we got regulators actively now and regulations coming up, are they impacting the industry? Are we seeing something which is turning the corner from that side, from regulation side?
Yes, I think there are two sides of it. First of all, we see impact. Like if you follow these numbers, and I would say that the amount of fraud has probably peaked in 2022, right? And from 2022 to 2023, that's not in every country, right? Like that's just like a trend, like in the majority of the countries. It seems to be like saturating, going league the same level, or even going down rather than going further upwards. There was a steep increase from 2019 to 2022. And it's twofold. Yes, the industry itself is doing something about this. But because the consumer issues are so big, the national regulators also decided that they have to intervene. And numerous regulators around the globe have taken action already or are in the process of taking action. They have different ways or shades, if you will, to intervene and different perspectives on it. Like it's also in the different countries. Like there is UK, Finland, Denmark, Netherlands, Singapore, and the US who have taken action and have either passed regulation or have even implemented solutions already to take action. And they have also reported on successes that they have. But they have also looked at different approaches, right? So some said, okay, like we need to be able to forbid specific use cases and implementation, right? To force the migration to other means. I just mentioned Singapore recently. And I think also this might work for a specific application in this country, like for the finance institutes. It's a question of a general approach, I would say. Are the means that they migrate to will they be better from a security perspective? And more importantly, from a cost effectiveness, consumer satisfaction? Things are happening, but from a regulator standpoint, I would say we don't have enough reference material to say if those approaches are good enough and if they really do that trick, if they like force away from SMS to FA to other channels. General sentiment, I would say, is like it's uncertain and potentially will impact customer satisfaction negatively. Other approaches of the regulators and the national authorities are best effort, right? And this is what is being implemented predominantly right now, is to say, okay, we focus only on the registration and protection of the largest domestic brands, right? So that the brands that pose the largest risk of being impersonated and doing harm to our consumers in the country, we protect those channels. So instead of prohibiting 2FA for banks, we protect all of the bank's traffic, right? So we intervene and we go to the mobile operators, we put a central registry in place. Some of the industries have done this already self-regulating, like MEF has done, for example, in the UK, which this approach. And that is a great approach, and it has shown good successes for the limited scope they have, right? So these are often solutions. And on a recent workshop in Copenhagen, where the regulators came together with the mobile operators and the entire industry to discuss this subject, right, of abuse of messaging, they presented solutions, they presented good results, but it was always limited in scope. It was generally around financial institutions, and it was generally only around large corporations, large brands. So I think that whilst this seems to be a very good approach and in the consumer's interest, probably the more promising path for regulators is to look for like scalable solutions. And you see that in Ireland or in Australia, the government is putting a lot of effort into analyzing what can be done. Like how would a scalable solution look like? What things could be done? MEF is discussing this as well in work groups, right? And That part, though, is still a bit out there, because from a regulatory perspective, for them to be able to act, they have to pass like laws and rules, and that typically concerns numbering plan, it concerns usage of numbers, number allocation. They have to pass like laws and regulation around accountability, traceback rights, right to block, right, the right to look into content. So there is still a lot that the regulators and national authorities will have to do, but they're on the right track, right? And on the positive side, I would say for SMS in general, and I have seen many operators ask that, or we plead to the regulators saying, like, finally do that to create clarity here. Like, who is accountable, right? Who should be dealing with these cases, and what can we actually do to intervene? You know, some countries can't even look at the content because it's legally not allowed. Yes, some have legal legitimate interests, some others don't, right? And these are the questions that the regulators are still yet to answer on a global scale. But more and more regulators join, more and more comments are being made, more and more actions are being taken, and the majority of them are around protecting existing successful use cases around time-critical communications, because it's understood that is a necessity and also within the consumer interest.
I'm going to ask you, I don't know if it's a tough question or an easy question after what you just said. What are the solutions that are really cropping up, that are really coming up with a strong impact in this market? So that, you talked about lots of people doing lots of things, more complex, but which one are there the most promising?
I think there are three answers to this question. It's a rather easy question, but also a challenging question to answer in its entirety. And I'm not sure I might be missing something, but the biggest hype and fuss that you see typically is around high-tech solutions, around cryptographic protection, blockchain solutions, certificates in the payload or out of band and whatnot. And you have the learnings or the voice side on the other hand that is also doing things in this direction. And you have massive investments and still shaking. But all of this is, I would say, fluffy at its best, and it fails to really create the successes. But there is a lot of conversation around it, and I don't want to deny that might be technology that can be used in the future to really cement some of the ideas that are being successful today into new technologies. But there are two proven approaches today, I would say, that the regulators have taken on and that work. One is around the principles of closing the networks. Right? One of the advantages the OTTs have is these are closed networks. These are not open networks. So you can decide who gets access and who doesn't get access, right? So you can put a lengthy registration process in front. And if you have ever tried to register for WhatsApp, this is work. You don't have that in SMS, right? And it was good for it to become such a big market as it is, but it has shown that if something becomes too successful, you need to at one point close the doors and put a bouncer in front. And many regulators have now decided to implement registries, right? They have said, close down your networks for A2P, let the P2P as it is, but separate out the A2P, and make the access to it restricted and make people register for it. And as I said, some of the countries have said the government will help and we will intervene and we will participate, and then it's technologically limited. Other countries like the US have decided already a decade ago that they would do that, that they would say, okay, we just create a central registry with all of the sender IDs that are being used in messaging at all. And they've done that a decade ago to keep their networks clean. And it works at scale and it works really nicely. And the successes presented at that workshop in Copenhagen by Finland, Denmark, Netherlands, they were all based on registries, right? And I think MEF can tell its own success story about what has happened to the brands that are registered in MEF's registry in the UK. And the second, it's not so much about the connections and the network, it's more about looking into the message and the content, because there are cases where fraudsters get control over totally legitimate access points. Yeah, they hijack a device, they hijack an account. they buy a legitimate phone number. Like all of these things, it's very hard to block per se. Like you can't like separate that out because they're already inside. So the only way there would be to look into the content, right? And there AI can certainly help by analyzing content, by creating cross-references, by scanning, analyzing links and whatnot. This gets more and more sophisticated, and I think many platform providers that do content analysis have also developed quite a lot over the last 2 years to adopt to the ever-changing fronts of scenarios, specifically with the power of AI. Funnily enough, even they ask for registration because they would like to have reference material, right? So when they say that, okay, like if it is my job to protect the customers of a bank, I need to know what the bank is typically communicating, so I don't falsely block their content, right? So it would be great if the bank would register their assets. I could get these assets and then run these as templates against what I'm doing on the content analysis and filtering. But those are the two that are predominantly successful and working well.
Well, I think I'm taking notes, and out of that, the three main things you mentioned were cryptographic, the registries, and then the analytics, the inside messages, views. Well, on the second one, we haven't talked about net numbers, but I'll probably bring it up. You are involved in one of the registries, or one of the mechanics of the registries, specifically in US, and in many other places, I assume. But what would you say that is the role of these registry in the ecosystem in US and globally? Are the registry changing the industry?
For the US, it's an interesting question if they're changing the industry because it has been established over a decade ago. So the industry is used to that. In other parts of the world, I would say yes, because the networks change from doing everything by themselves to typically a domestic approach on what are the principles that we want to implement into our like messaging ecosystem. And the role of a central registry is to provide the tools independently, but also being authoritative to the industry that they can enforce their policies. They're not the police. They're not registries don't make the policies. They don't make the rules, but they provide as a neutral third party the tools so that the industry can actually enforce those. And these are typically around black and white listing of communications, which is a very sensitive topic in telecommunications because it's such an essential channel. Yeah. And that in order to achieve that, the tools that you need there are manifold, right? You need to have the assets of a brand registered, right? And that has who is the sender, who is the brand, what are their sender IDs, phone numbers, what are their use cases, or if you want to call them campaigns, what is their assets that they're going to use with this, like logos, names, content, links, etc. What are the CSPs that they're using? All of this needs to be like put into a central place, and you need to have a place where you can put this. And you also have to have very good security around this, right? Because like if you think about that, you have a central place where all of this is stored. If the access to this is not well protected, it's more of a vulnerability than a safety tool. And on the other side, and that's the second part of the registry's job, is to distribute that information to the eligible parties that need that information. Like I, as Deutsche Telekom, cannot protect my network if I don't know what I should allow in or what I should be blocking. So I need that information. And that's the second element of a registry, the second role. One, allow everybody to come in and register their good use cases and filter out the bad ones, not allow them in, based on the policies of the ecosystem. Which can be, for example, third-party vetting, like it is in the US. And the second side, once you have that information, make sure that it only is accessible, but easily accessible in real time to the parties that need to control their networks. On what's going on with these registries, because the regulators have really doubled down on this approach, as it is a very cost-effective and scalable solution to protect existing use cases. And some of the countries have some very interesting results as well. Like the US, for example, they can afford to not use alphanumeric sender IDs. So they have basically individual phone numbers or sender IDs for every small and medium business. And still, although they have so many A2P sender IDs being used, I think today there are approximately 25 million distinct sender IDs that are being used for A2P in the United States, compared to only a few thousand shortcodes and alphanumeric sender IDs in other countries. They still managed to basically eliminate spoofing. And that's not me saying that because I'm holding up here a flag for messaging and being like positive on it in general. It's the American authorities, the Federal Communications Commission, who has in a recent consultation acknowledged that number spoofing in the SMS and MMS domain is rare at this time, and that providers that originate text generally permit their customers to initiate those texts only from numbers for which they are the assignee, which means phone numbers are only used by those that should use it. That means no spoofing, which is a great success. And the main purpose, I would say, of a sender ID registry, because it eliminates like impersonation, which is one of the biggest attack vectors that the governments want to fight. I think that's although it is sad, I might be able to close this webinar myself with a couple of few like final thoughts around what's coming in the future and what else might be possible to be done to keep the trust in messaging and to maintain the revenue and potentially even grow the revenue, right? So another example of great work from MEF recently is the guide to 10DLC A2P channel in the US. That was announced in Toronto beginning of this week. If you're interested in how the US is dealing with this A2P channel in the United States, which is still growing, by the way, in contrast to like other countries, because they have it protected already. I encourage you to read that guide. It's very in-depth, very extensive. And what it outlines are 5 prime candidates, 5 prime use cases for the A2P over 10 DLC, showing great versatility and great applications for it. Specifically, inclusion is something that I like a lot, meaning that the solution allows all and every small and medium business to merge their voice and messaging capabilities using a single number, which definitely enhances and improves their local presence. Here in Germany, I generally have like multiple numbers for brands, which is sort of confusing and also adds a little bit to the decreasing trust, because if I get a message, or even if it's a WhatsApp from a completely new number, I first need to verify whether that's actually the brand or not. Like, if I would receive the communication on a different channel, but still using the same number, I would immediately trust it. And the same goes for doctor and dentists. By the way, this is the vertical where consumers still trust the most for data protection. They think that hospitals and doctors protect their data the best. They can use their existing phone numbers for appointment confirmations and reminders. Another use case and great application here is just like large enterprises. They can extend the usage of their phone numbers that they have provisioned for various departments to have streamlined communication, right? Not only one inbox for the brand, but multiple inboxes depending on the department that you're dealing with. And that can range from individual account manager and consultant to support department or sales department or what you have. Even for B2B, you can then have dedicated inboxes and numbers, which is good. And additionally, last but not least, it caters also to the customer preference. As I said earlier, like text messaging is still a very privacy conscious channel and inbox that is preferred by consumers for texting. And not only that, it's also a channel that is used heavily in marketplaces where consumers act and interact with consumers. You can think of ride sharing. You can think of Airbnb use cases, etc., where you communicate with others, and they would not want your private number to be shared. So a prime use case also of using 10DLC there, and the benefit of registries like ours that can build that, is you can create virtual numbers that you can temporarily assign to a user to mask the actual private phone number. So your Uber driver would never see your real mobile number if you interact with them. Same with your Airbnb host. I think those use cases will also stay for a very long time and become important for a very, very long time. And in general, like people, even if it's not bound to such an application, but people like to have an application on their phone with a second number, maybe through Google Voice or Skype, generally for professional use or for interactions that are temporary. And the creation of virtual numbers in a registry is one of the big benefits here as well. From a telco perspective, I would say registries and the approach that the governments are doing today, phone number registries, central registries, has also other applications that go beyond A2P. For example, in cases where MVNOs want to get more control over the network and use their phone numbers for business messaging, for example, and want to like manage their own connectivity and their own messaging revenues independent of the host network, they can do so by provisioning their phone numbers also in the central phone number registry, configuring their own endpoints, configuring their own infrastructure to then be able to go out and negotiate their own commercials with their partners. Yeah. So overall, as a closing remark, to sum all of this up, I would say for the future, the recent developments have shown that whilst SMS is under attack, consumers still want it, and it's still an extremely valuable channel that has its rights and benefits. So in order to keep going here, brands will have to register their assets. They will have to protect their assets through registries or through other products that allow this. And once this has been done, you have verified senders, and that's what I would say is the trick. Making it mandatory to register sender IDs and brands' assets, phone numbers for A2P SMS. And it's not a nuisance. It's also everyday business for RCS and WhatsApp and all of the new upcoming competitors. And once we have established that and that is implemented, we will continue as an industry to reliably fulfill the consumer preference to service them with time-critical communications via SMS. So I thank you all for spending the time of joining us today in the last summer's webinar. Also representing MEF, I want to do a few, like first of all, in my own interest, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. You find me on LinkedIn or via email. And you can find the majority of the information of our company also on netnumber.com or on the LinkedIn page of NetNumber. And with regards to MEF, there's going to be a very interesting event around fighting fraud in Brussels at the beginning of September. So you should definitely check this out. And you should also check out the reports that are being published by MEF on a regular basis. And as I said, just like early this week, there was a report on the 10DLC A2P channel in the United States that was published. Yeah, and with this, thank you, Dario, for hosting the majority of the session. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and see you all